Remember what I said about free trade? Well, the thing is, it's all very well and good to say people should be free, but you need to actually devise systems to allow them to do that. You can have people represent themselves democratically, but how are you going to do that if these people can't read or write? Seriously, how does a democracy work if people are illiterate? They can't even educate themselves on the issues. Well, in order for a democracy to function, public education. You want people to be able to represent their own interests? They need to have a minimum level of education necessary to do so. Cool. But that's not enough either. Just because they're capable of voting in their own interests, that doesn't mean they live in a system that encourages freedom. And a political system which encourages freedom, like, for example, a representative democracy, or even a direct democracy in some instances, that's good. But what about the economy? Economics is important. You can't just ignore that, you know. I mean, imagine, you live in a kingdom, now a nation state, with time, and you think, well, fuck. In order for me to live, I mean, we all need to work, we need to produce, and something has to be done with this wealth. There are billions or even trillions of dollars flowing around, you know, in modern currency. There's a lot of wealth flowing around in this state, in this space. What's to be done with it? Who gets what? How do we allocate wealth, resources? Enter Adam Smith. The economic system, which was supposed to solve all of our problems. The economic system, which was supposed to unequivocally solve the problems of inequality, of intolerance, and of unequal representation in the modern world. Capitalism. No longer would kings and queens, tyrants and aristocrats, no longer would they have sole control over the economic output of a society. No! In capitalism, free trade and free association means that you, as an individual citizen, have the right to go out there and to sell your labor to a person offer. You want a job? They have a job. They want your productivity? You want to give it. They have money? You want money. It's incredible. It perfectly represents everything the Enlightenment was supposed to be about. Everything. The free association, the ability to do with your life what you wish, the ability to eschew the old world values of anti-egalitarian segregationism. Well, why would you be racist in a capitalist society? Discriminating against a constituency will only have negative market outcomes because the more productive and the more educated a subset of the population is, the more economically prosperous they're going to be, which benefits the entire economy. There were some problems. Some problems happened. Believe it or not, capitalism did not solve all of the problems that the old world had brought about. All of this divisive, anti-freedom, this authoritarianism, this segregationist principality, it didn't solve all of it. There were problems. Serious problems. Adam Smith recognized some of them in Wealth of Nations, you know. It's not like these appeared out of the ether. It was always known that this was to be an experiment, and experiments have upsides and downsides. And, hey, capitalism had upsides. Capitalism was able to ingeniously take advantage of the material conditions of the Industrial Revolution. In just a couple of decades, in America, I believe, it's either in America or England, over the course of just a couple of decades, that country went from having 1/20th of its citizenry living in cities to 1/2. From 5% to 50%. Now, there were problems, absolutely. Factory work, coal mining, these were brutal, brutal jobs. People were shacked up into tenement housing, 2 or 3 families to a single building, substandard insulation, fires inside factories with the doors locked. There were miserable, miserable circumstances of this time. But hey, there were benefits. Because the overwhelming increase in wealth that came along with the Industrial Revolution, aided by capitalism, to a large extent, increased the overall productive force of the participating economies 5-fold, 10-fold, 100-fold. I know this may be difficult for us to imagine, but for a very long time in Europe, you had a nice shirt for church and a shit shirt for working the fields. And if a hole appeared in either one, it was of the utmost priority that hole be repaired because you are not getting another fucking shirt. And in just a century, we went from that to a society in which an ever-growing middle class was capable of not only consuming, but consuming excessively. This is new. The idea that any group of people other than the aristocracy, other than the absolute pinnacle of society, are capable of, like, excessive consumption, this is completely new. That's for millennia, that would have been conceptually unfathomable. Like, it wouldn't, that's unbelievable. And today we're riding high. I have like dozens of shirts. I could have hundreds. With my income, I could have 1,000 shirts. I could fill my entire house with shirts. The entire house. That's incredible. I mean, it really is. You know, we fuck with capitalism. Don't get me wrong, but give credit where credit's due. Fuck. Well, you know, there were problems. I mean, I'm talking about the good right now, but there was some real bad. There was some real fucking bad. Remember what I said earlier about the tenement housing and the substandard living conditions, the coal mining, the child slavery, the wage labor? I'm skipping over the fact there was actual chattel slavery in this country. There were problems, and capitalism, for all of the good it was doing, was not succeeding in its original promise to end inequality, to promote freedom. Wasn't doing it. If anything, the divide seemed to be getting greater and greater. It used to be that there was an aristocracy right here on the top, and then below them, there was pretty much everyone else. And there were like a couple of people in the merchant class, you know, like there was a thing. But for the most part, this was society. It was a pyramid, essentially. We've all seen these pyramids, haven't we? In 1984 and such. It was a pyramid with a very wide bottom and a very narrow top. But capitalism stretched out the pyramid big time. Sure, up here you still have the great big bankers and CEOs and the presidents of the United States of America and stuff, but now you've got millionaires and billionaires above them, and you've got upper middle class people who make 6 figures, and you've got middle class people who actually get to enjoy luxury goods but still live kind of paycheck to paycheck, and then you have the very poor people who don't really get that and just sort of scrape by, and then you have absolute poverty, the homelessness, and it didn't get better. Guys, the inequality didn't get better. It didn't get fixed. It just got stretched. It allowed more people to be nearer to the top, but it didn't end inequality. It didn't even come close. If anything, it made inequality more stable, because a system by which there's a few hundred or a few thousand aristocrats and royalty lording over millions of peasants is fundamentally unstable. All they need to do is heave their shoulders. Atlas need but shrug, and the aristocracy falls. But now, well, the uber poor only make up a small portion of the American population, and the others are very much dependent on the stability of the system they live within. We grow increasingly dependent on material and luxury goods. Not just that, but as society gets more complicated, subsistence living gets more difficult, meaning that should things go tits up, it's going to be harder and harder to live without the government we've become accustomed to. Back in the feudal days, if there was a revolution, do you think your average farmer really fucking cared? Do you know what happened to your average, like, farming village during, like, the French Revolution? They would do, I've heard unrest in the capital. And then a month later, a guard patrol would come by and saying, your taxes now go to this group of people. They may have raised or lowered. Otherwise, carry on. The capital could have been nuked, for all you know. It wouldn't have made a fucking difference. You just farm. Nowadays, everyone in society is incredibly dependent on the stability of that society. Even things like the GDP crashing because the housing market bubble bursts after banks gamble on subprime mortgage loan. Even that like weird esoteric, like non-physical fuck up leads to a catastrophic economic failure that fucks with billions of people's lives. This weird what the fuck is that? They gambled because they packaged subprime mortgage loans with AAA mortgage loans, and the regulatory oversight wasn't good enough. And because of this, billions of people suffered. What the fuck does that mean? What does that mean? That's fucked. Capitalism didn't fix inequality. It just made inequality more stable. And it made it harder to get rid of. Fuck. It's not much of a solution. And I'm not the first person to notice that. Not by a long shot. See, people were noticing that pretty much since day one. There were plenty of antagonisms between the purported freedom capitalism was supposed to bring and the actual inequality it wrought. Like from the word go, abolitionists were active back in the 17th century in the Americas. You know, like, this is by no means new. But there are undeniable benefits to capitalism. It do raise that GDP. Now, the money doesn't go where it needs to, but it's productive. So, hey,